The diplomatic halls of Station Kepler buzzed with nervous energy, as representatives from 12 different species gathered for what many considered humanity's final chance at galactic acceptance. Captain Marcus Chen stood at the observation deck, watching the sleek alien vessels dock with practiced precision. 3 years had passed since Earth's first contact, and humanity still remained on the outside looking in. The Galactic Confederation had made their position clear. Humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too dangerous to be granted full membership. They were tolerated as a curiosity, allowed to establish this single diplomatic outpost, but nothing more. No trade agreements, no technology exchanges, no cultural partnerships. Earth remained isolated, its people growing increasingly desperate as resources dwindled and overpopulation threatened their homeworld. Marcus adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform and made his way to the main assembly hall. As the senior human representative, he carried the weight of 8 billion souls on his shoulders. The other species barely acknowledged his presence as he took his designated seat at the far end of the circular chamber. The Vraxians with their crystalline exoskeletons whispered among themselves in harmonic frequencies. The Kalari, tall and graceful with their flowing tentacle-like appendages, glided past without a glance. Even the diminutive Pixori, no larger than human children, seemed to regard him with obvious disdain. The session began with the usual formalities. Trade disputes between the Vraxians and the Thek Consortium over mining rights in the Outer Spiral. Territorial negotiations between the Kalari and the Zephyrian Empire regarding contested space lanes. Technology sharing agreements that would benefit all member species. Humanity was mentioned only once in passing, as a potential security concern that required continued monitoring. As the hours dragged on, Marcus felt the familiar weight of failure settling over him. Another day, another diplomatic dead end. Earth's situation grew more desperate with each passing month, but the Confederation remained unmoved by human pleas for assistance or partnership. They saw humans as little more than violent primitives who had somehow stumbled into space travel. The session was drawing to a close when she entered the chamber. Marcus had never seen her species before, which was remarkable given his 3 years of diplomatic experience. She was roughly humanoid in shape but smaller, perhaps 5 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Her large violet eyes swept the room with obvious desperation before settling on him. What struck Marcus most was not her alien beauty, but the raw fear and anguish written across her delicate features. She moved with halting steps, clearly injured or weakened. Her clothing, what appeared to be some form of environmental suit, was torn and damaged. Several other species representatives noticed her arrival and began whispering among themselves, but none moved to help. The Kalari delegate actually shifted away from her path, as if she carried some form of contamination. The chamber fell silent as she approached the human section. Marcus rose from his seat, uncertain of protocol but unable to ignore her obvious distress. Up close, he could see that her shimmering skin was marked with what looked like burn scars, and her breathing was labored. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but the universal translator picked up her words clearly. "Please," she said, reaching out with a trembling hand. "I have nowhere else to turn. My people, my world, everything is gone. The Confederation refuses to help because we are not members, and we cannot become members because we no longer have a world to represent. I am the last of the Lyrians." Marcus felt his breath catch. The implications of her words hit him like a physical blow. An entire species reduced to a single survivor, and the Confederation was turning its back on her because of bureaucratic technicalities. He looked around the chamber and saw the other delegates either ignoring the scene entirely or watching with cold academic interest. "What happened to your world?" Marcus asked gently, moving closer. Tears that sparkled like liquid starlight began flowing down her cheeks. "The Devourers came 6 months ago. We sent distress calls, begged for assistance, offered everything we had for protection. The Confederation said they would consider our application for emergency membership, but the process would take years. We had days." Her voice broke completely. "I was off-world when it happened, attending a cultural exchange on Vraxia Prime. When I returned, there was nothing left but debris and silence. The Devourers." Marcus had heard whispers of them in diplomatic circles, a mysterious force that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing behind. The Confederation's official position was that they were a myth, exaggerated stories from rimworld colonies. But looking at this broken survivor, Marcus knew the truth was far more terrifying. I have spent months traveling from system to system, begging for sanctuary, for citizenship, for any form of protection, she continued. Every species has turned me away. I have no world, no people, no legal standing in galactic law. I exist in a bureaucratic void, neither protected nor acknowledged. Marcus glanced around the chamber again. The other delegates had resumed their conversations, dismissing the Lyrian woman as someone else's problem. The casual cruelty of it made his stomach turn. Here was a being who had lost everything, and they couldn't be bothered to show even basic compassion. There is one possibility, she said, her violet eyes meeting his directly. Galactic law recognizes marriage bonds between species as a pathway to citizenship. If I could find someone willing to marry me, I would gain legal protection under their world's jurisdiction. She paused, her desperation becoming even more apparent. I know we are strangers. I know this is an enormous request, but you are my last hope. Humans are the only species that the others fear enough to respect such a union. Please, I am begging you. I have nothing left to offer except my life and my loyalty. The chamber seemed to freeze around them. Marcus realized that every delegate was now watching intently, waiting to see how the human would respond to this unprecedented situation. The weight of the moment pressed down on him as he looked into those pleading violet eyes and saw the last flickering hope of an entire civilization. His response would not just determine her fate, but potentially alter the course of human-alien relations forever. In this moment of desperate pleading, Marcus Chen held the power to save a species or watch it fade into extinction. The choice was his alone to make. Marcus stared into those violet eyes for what felt like an eternity, his mind racing through the implications of her request. Around them, the assembled delegates watched with barely concealed anticipation, some no doubt hoping to witness another human failure. The weight of her desperation was almost unbearable. But more than that, Marcus felt a familiar fire building in his chest. The same righteous anger that had driven humanity to reach for the stars now burned within him as he faced this cosmic injustice. What's your name? He asked softly, extending his hand toward her. Lisa Veltar, she replied, her voice trembling with fragile hope. I was a xenobiologist on my homeworld, specializing in interspecies communication patterns. Before everything ended, Marcus nodded slowly, his decision crystallizing. Lisa, I need you to understand something about humans. We have a saying on Earth. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I've spent 3 years watching this confederation turn their backs on those who need help most. I won't be part of that anymore. He turned to face the assembled delegates, his voice carrying clearly across the chamber. I, Captain Marcus Chen of Earth, formally accept Lisa Veltar's proposal of marriage under the protection of human law and jurisdiction. The words echoed through the hall, followed by a stunned silence. The Vraxian delegate was the first to recover, his crystalline form resonating with agitation. This is highly irregular. The Confederation has not approved such an arrangement. There are procedures, protocols that must be followed. According to Galactic Law Article 7, Section 12, Marcus replied, his years of diplomatic training finally serving a purpose that mattered. Marriage bonds between consenting adults of recognized species are automatically valid across all member territories. Humanity may not be a full member, but we are recognized. And last I checked, the Confederation's own laws supersede your personal disapproval. A ripple of shocked whispers spread through the chamber. The Kalari representative, Ambassador Vexen, rose gracefully from her position. Even if such a union were legally valid, it would not grant the female automatic protection. She would need to be formally accepted by Earth's government. Marcus smiled grimly. Then it's fortunate that as senior diplomatic representative, I have the authority to grant emergency citizenship to refugees facing extinction-level threats. Consider it done. Lisa's legs gave out beneath her and Marcus caught her before she could fall. The relief washing over her face was heartbreaking. You really mean it? You'll help me? Not just help, Marcus said, his voice growing stronger. I'm going to make sure everyone in this room understands what real civilization looks like. He activated his communication device. This is Captain Chen to all Earth diplomatic channels. I'm transmitting a full record of today's proceedings to Earth Command, the Interstellar News Network, and every independent media outlet in known space. The effect was immediate. Several delegates began speaking at once, their carefully maintained diplomatic facades cracking. The Pixori representative, Ambassador Zichtel, stepped forward with obvious concern. "Captain Chen, surely there's no need for such drastic measures. This is a delicate situation that requires careful consideration." "Delicate?" Marcus's voice carried a dangerous edge. "A woman has lost her entire species to an enemy you all pretend doesn't exist, and you call helping her delicate? What's delicate is your precious Confederation's reputation once the galaxy learns how you treat genocide survivors." Ambassador Vexhan's tentacle appendages writhed with agitation. "You don't understand the complexities involved. The Devourers are a threat beyond your comprehension. Getting involved with their victims brings only danger. So you admit they exist," Marcus said sharply. "Yet your official position is that they're a myth. How many worlds have to die while you debate the politics of acknowledging reality?" The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates began arguing among themselves. Some demanded Marcus be censured for his outburst, while others quietly acknowledged that the human had a point. Through it all, Lisa remained pressed against Marcus's side, still unable to believe that someone had finally chosen to help her. In the midst of the arguments, a new voice cut through the noise. "Perhaps we are approaching this incorrectly." The speaker was Ambassador Torvan of the Thek Consortium, one of the more reasonable voices in the Confederation. "The human raises valid concerns about our response to the Devourer threat, and his marriage to the Lyrian female, while unexpected, is legally sound." "You're actually supporting this madness?" the Vraxian delegate demanded. "I'm supporting the law," Torvan replied calmly. "And more importantly, I'm recognizing courage when I see it. The human has done something none of us were willing to do. He's taken responsibility for a refugee when we all found excuses to look away." Marcus felt Lysa squeeze his hand gratefully, but he wasn't done yet. "There's something else you all need to understand. Earth's protection extends beyond just Lisa now. We're officially offering sanctuary to any survivor of Devourer attacks. No bureaucratic delays, no membership requirements, no political games. Just basic decency." The announcement sent another shockwave through the chamber. Earth had just unilaterally declared itself a refugee haven, directly challenging the Confederation's authority over such matters. It was either an act of breathtaking courage or suicidal stupidity, and Marcus wasn't entirely sure which. "You can't make such proclamations without Confederation approval," Ambassador Vexhan protested. "Watch us," Marcus replied simply. "Earth may not be a full member of your club, but we're still a sovereign world. And we choose to act like it." Lisa looked up at him with wonder in her violet eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you risking everything for a stranger?" Marcus smiled down at her, feeling more human than he had in years. "Because someone once told me that the measure of a civilization isn't how it treats its powerful members, but how it protects its weakest. Today, you're the weakest person in this room, and that makes protecting you the most important thing I can do." As chaos continued to swirl around them, Marcus realized that this moment would change everything. The careful diplomatic dance he'd been performing for 3 years was over. Humanity had just chosen its side in a cosmic conflict, and there would be no going back. But looking at the hope returning to Lisa's eyes, Marcus knew they had chosen correctly. Sometimes the most human thing you could do was to simply be human, regardless of the consequences. The galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. The private quarters aboard Station Kepler had never felt more cramped as Marcus helped Lisa settle into the small guest alcove adjacent to his diplomatic suite. The events in the assembly chamber had concluded hours ago, but the aftershocks were still reverberating throughout the station. Emergency communications flooded in from Earth, while alien diplomats held hushed conferences behind closed doors. Lisa sat on the edge of the simple bed, still seeming unable to believe her circumstances had changed so dramatically. The medical scanner Marcus had retrieved from the station's human medical bay revealed the extent of her ordeal. Malnutrition, exhaustion, and stress-related trauma painted a picture of months spent in desperate survival mode. "You should eat," Marcus said gently, placing a tray of human-compatible foods beside her. The station's food synthesizers had managed to produce something that met Lyrian dietary requirements, though it looked unappetizing, even by military ration standards. "I keep expecting to wake up," Lysa said softly, picking at the food without much enthusiasm. For 6 months, every door has been closed to me. Every species found reasons why they couldn't help. I began to think I would die alone in some forgotten corner of space. Marcus pulled up a chair across from her, studying her delicate features in the soft lighting. Even exhausted and traumatized, there was an intelligence in her violet eyes that reminded him why her people had been renowned xenobiologists. "Tell me about your world, about your people." A shadow of pain crossed her face, but she began to speak. Lyrian was a garden world in the Outer Rim, about 40,000 light-years from here. We were peaceful, focused on scientific research and artistic expression. Our cities grew like living things, shaped from crystallized organic compounds that responded to our bioelectric fields. When I was young, I could make entire walls bloom with colors just by touching them. She paused, her hands unconsciously moving in small gestures as if still trying to coax responses from surfaces that no longer existed. We studied other species with reverence, believing that understanding different forms of life was the highest calling. I spent decades learning communication patterns, trying to bridge the gaps between different ways of thinking. We thought knowledge would protect us. "How many of your people were there?" Marcus asked. 2,700,000,000 at the last census, Lisa replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "In 3 days, the Devourers reduced that to dust and empty space. They don't just kill, Marcus. They consume everything. The matter, the energy, even the quantum information that makes up molecular bonds. It's as if our world never existed at all." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The scale of the loss was almost incomprehensible. Nearly 3 billion lives and entire civilizations' accumulated knowledge and culture, erased as if they had never been. The Confederation must have some intelligence about these Devourers, some idea of what they are or where they come from. Lisa's expression hardened slightly. "They know more than they admit. I've spent months in archives following intelligence reports and classified communications. The Devourers have been active for at least 50 years, consuming dozens of worlds along the galactic rim. But they always target non-member species or newly contacted civilizations, never full Confederation members. You think it's deliberate? That the Confederation is somehow protected? I think the Confederation prefers to pretend threats don't exist if acknowledging them would require difficult decisions," Lysa said with bitter wisdom. "As long as only lesser species suffer, they can maintain their comfortable status quo." Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus's communication device chiming with an urgent message. Earth Command's response had finally arrived, and it was more significant than he had dared hope. Admiral Sarah Torres herself had recorded the message, her weathered face filling the small holographic display. "Captain Chen, your actions today have created quite a stir, both on Earth and apparently throughout the Confederation. I want you to know that Earth Command fully supports your decision. In fact, the United Earth Council has voted to formally establish the Refugee Protection Protocol you announced. As of now, Earth is officially offering sanctuary to any being fleeing extinction-level threats." Marcus saw Lisa's eyes widen at this confirmation that his promises hadn't been empty gestures. Admiral Torres continued, "More importantly, your marriage to Ms. Veltar has been officially recognized by Earth government. She is now a full citizen with all rights and protections that entails. We're also assigning additional diplomatic personnel to Station Kepler to help coordinate refugee assistance efforts." The message shifted to display technical specifications. "Finally, Captain, we're sending the Earth defense ship Indomitable to provide security for the station. Recent intelligence suggests that your actions may have attracted unwanted attention. The ship will arrive within 72 hours. As the message ended, Marcus noticed Lisa staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What is it?" "You mentioned that marriage was legally recognized," she said carefully. "I need you to understand something. When I asked you to marry me, it was desperation speaking. I don't expect you to honor that as anything more than a legal arrangement. I won't hold you to promises made under such circumstances." Marcus considered her words carefully. The truth was he hadn't fully thought through the implications when he'd accepted her proposal. His focus had been entirely on saving her life and making a statement to the Confederation. But now, looking at this remarkable woman who had survived the complete destruction of her species with her dignity intact, he found himself wondering what might be possible between them. "What if I want to honor it?" he asked quietly. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibilities. Lisa's bioluminescent skin began to shimmer more brightly, a response Marcus was beginning to recognize as emotional arousal of some kind. "You don't know me," she said softly. "You don't know our compatibility, our cultural differences, whether we could ever truly understand each other." "Then maybe we should find out," Marcus replied. "You said you were a xenobiologist specializing in interspecies communication. I've spent my career trying to bridge the gap between humanity and alien civilizations. If anyone could make this work, it might be us." For the first time since he'd met her, Lisa smiled genuinely, and the expression transformed her entire face. The sadness and desperation were still there, but underneath was something that might have been hope. "There's something else you should know," she said. "Lyrian bonding practices are intense. We form deep empathic connections with our partners, sharing emotions and memories through bioelectric resonance. If we truly become partners, you'll experience my grief over losing my people as if it were your own." Marcus reached out and took her hand, feeling the strange tingle of her bioelectric field against his skin. "Then you'll also share my determination to make sure no other species suffers the same fate. Together we might be strong enough to do something about the devourers." As their hands touched, Marcus felt something he couldn't quite explain, a warmth that seemed to flow between them, carrying with it echoes of emotion and memory. For just a moment he glimpsed the terrible beauty of Lyrian's crystalline cities and felt the crushing weight of their loss. But he also sensed Lysa experiencing his own memories of Earth's blue skies and the fierce protective instinct that drove humanity to defend the innocent. In that shared moment, Marcus realized that their marriage might become something far more profound than either of them had imagined. They weren't just two individuals seeking convenience or survival. They were representatives of their species, carrying the hopes and dreams of their peoples into an uncertain future. Together, they might find a way to protect both humanity and any other species willing to stand against the darkness consuming the galaxy's edge. The arrival of the Earth defense ship Indomitable 3 days later sent shockwaves through Station Kepler's carefully maintained diplomatic neutrality. The massive vessel dwarfed every other ship in the docking bay, its angular hull bristling with weapon systems that made several alien delegates openly nervous. Marcus watched through the observation deck as Captain Elena Vasquez led her crew through standard docking procedures, noting how other species' vessels seemed to give the human ship an unusually wide berth. Lisa stood beside him, her hand resting in his as they observed the controlled chaos of the military arrival. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of bureaucratic challenges, media attention, and deepening personal connection between them. The empathic bond she had described was growing stronger, allowing them to share emotions and even fragments of memory with increasing clarity. "Your people project strength very effectively," Lysa observed, watching as armored human marines disembarked in perfect formation. "The other species fear you, but they also respect that fear. It's a delicate balance. We've learned that sometimes fear is the only language bullies understand," Marcus replied, thinking of the Confederation's dismissive treatment of both humanity and refugees like Lisa. "Though I prefer when people choose cooperation over intimidation." Captain Vasquez arrived at their quarters an hour later, her bearing crisp and professional, despite the diplomatic complexity of her mission. She was younger than Marcus had expected, probably in her early 40s, with the kind of intense focus that came from commanding a warship in uncertain times. "Captain Chen, Ms. Veltar," she said, offering formal salutes. "I'm here to brief you on recent intelligence developments. What I'm about to share is classified at the highest levels, but Earth Command believes you both need to understand the full scope of what we're facing." They gathered around Marcus's small conference table as Vasquez activated a secure holographic display. The image showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy's outer rim, with dozens of red markers scattered across previously inhabited systems. These are confirmed Devourer attack sites over the past 50 years, Vasquez explained. What's disturbing is the pattern. They're not random strikes. There's a deliberate progression, moving inward toward more densely populated regions of the galaxy. Lysa leaned forward, her scientific training taking over despite her personal trauma. Show me the timeline. When did each attack occur? The display shifted, showing dates and progression patterns. What emerged was deeply troubling. The attacks were accelerating, with the time between strikes decreasing dramatically over the past decade. My God, Lysa whispered. They're not just consuming worlds randomly. They're following resource gradients, targeting systems with specific characteristics. Her fingers traced patterns in the holographic display. High energy output, diverse biospheres, significant technological development. They're farming civilizations. Marcus felt a chill as the implications sank in. How long before they reach Confederation core worlds? At current progression rates, approximately 15 years, Vasquez replied grimly. But that assumes they maintain existing patterns. Recent intelligence suggests they may be preparing for a major escalation. She activated another display, showing long-range sensor data from the galactic rim. Dark shapes moved between star systems, too large and numerous to be natural phenomena. The image quality was poor, but the implications were clear. The Devourers weren't just isolated raiders. They were a coordinated force of enormous scale. The Confederation has had this intelligence for months, Vasquez continued. They've classified it above most member species clearance levels. Only the Inner Council knows the full extent of the threat. While they debate and delay, entire species die, Marcus said angrily. How many more Lyrians will be sacrificed to their bureaucratic cowardice? Lysa's grip on his hand tightened, and through their growing bond he felt her sharing his outrage. But underneath her anger was something else. Scientific curiosity mixed with desperate hope. Captain Vasquez, do you have detailed sensor readings from Devourer attack sites, spectral analysis, quantum signatures, anything that might help us understand what they actually are? Vasquez hesitated. Some data exists, but it's fragmentary. The Devourers leave very little behind to analyze. However, there is something unusual. Every attack site shows traces of exotic matter, specifically dark energy signatures that shouldn't occur naturally. Dark energy? Lysa's bioluminescent skin began flickering with excitement. Marcus, this could be crucial. My people theorized about dark energy manipulation for decades. If the Devourers are somehow harnessing it, you think you might understand their technology? Marcus asked. Possibly. Lyrian science was built around understanding energy-matter conversion at the quantum level. Our cities, our technology, even our biological processes used principles that might apply to dark energy manipulation. She paused, her expression growing troubled. But if I'm right about what they're doing, stopping them will require resources and cooperation on a massive scale. Captain Vasquez leaned back in her chair. Earth Command anticipated you might have insights. That's actually the secondary reason I'm here. We're prepared to offer you access to our most advanced research facilities, along with any captured Devourer technology we've managed to acquire. You fought them before? Marcus asked sharply. Twice. Both times were defensive actions when Devourer scouts probed systems near human colonies. We managed to drive them off and recover some debris, but the cost was significant. Earth defense ship Thermopylae was lost with all hands in the second engagement. Lysa absorbed this information, her scientific mind clearly racing through possibilities. I'll need to examine everything. Debris, sensor data, tactical analyses. If there's any chance of developing countermeasures, I have to try. There's one more thing, Vasquez said, her expression growing even more serious. Intelligence suggests that your actions in the assembly chamber may have attracted Devourer attention. We've detected increased scout activity in this sector since you made your refugee proclamation. Marcus felt Lysa's fear spike through their bond, but also her determination. They're coming because we offered sanctuary to their victims? Possibly. The Devourers seem to be very thorough about eliminating survivors. Your public protection of Ms. Veltar may have painted a target on both of you. The weight of responsibility settled over Marcus like a physical burden. His decision to help Lysa hadn't just changed their personal circumstances. It had potentially put Earth itself at risk. Then we need to be ready for them, he said firmly. Captain, how long before you can transport us to Earth's research facilities? The Indomitable can depart within 6 hours if needed. But Captain Chen, you should understand that leaving Station Kepler now would effectively end your diplomatic career. The Confederation won't tolerate a human representative who openly defies their authority. Marcus looked at Lisa, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her violet eyes. Their time as passive diplomatic observers was over. The galaxy faced a threat that bureaucracy and politics couldn't solve. It would take courage, sacrifice, and the kind of desperate innovation that only came from having everything at stake. Then it's time to stop being diplomats and start being defenders, Marcus said. The Confederation has had 50 years to address this threat and chose to ignore it. Maybe it's time for someone else to take the lead. As if responding to his words, Lisa's skin began glowing brighter, her bioelectric field resonating with his determination. Through their bond, Marcus felt her complete agreement and something more. The fierce intellect that had made her people renowned scientists was focusing on a single goal: finding a way to stop the Devourers before they consumed everything she and Marcus had come to care about. Their marriage had begun as an act of desperation, but it was evolving into something far more significant, a partnership that might be the galaxy's best hope for survival. The journey to Earth aboard the Indomitable took 2 weeks, during which Marcus and Lisa spent countless hours studying the fragmentary data on Devourer technology. The ship's advanced analysis systems revealed patterns that had been invisible to standard Confederation equipment, and Lisa's unique perspective as both a Lyrian xenobiologist and a survivor began yielding startling insights. "Look at this," Lisa said, her fingers dancing over the holographic display in the ship's main laboratory. "The energy signatures aren't random. They follow quantum resonance patterns that match theoretical models for dimensional membrane manipulation." Marcus leaned over her shoulder, close enough to feel the warmth of her bioelectric field. Over the past weeks, their empathic bond had deepened to the point where they could share complex thoughts and memories with startling clarity. It was like having access to an entirely different way of processing information. "You think they're from another dimension?" he asked. "Not exactly. More like they exist partially outside our dimensional framework. That would explain how they can consume matter so completely. They're not just destroying it. They're translating it into a parallel energy state." She manipulated the display to show comparative analysis between normal matter and the exotic residue left behind by Devourer attacks. Vasquez entered the laboratory, followed by Dr. Sarah Kim, Earth's leading expert on exotic physics. The elderly scientist had spent the journey studying Lisa's theoretical frameworks, trying to understand how Lyrian science approached problems that human researchers had barely begun to consider. "Ms. Veltar, your analysis of the dimensional displacement patterns is extraordinary," Dr. Kim said without preamble. "But if you're correct about how they manipulate dark energy, stopping them would require technology we don't possess. The power requirements alone would be astronomical." Lisa's skin flickered with agitation. "That's what I thought initially. But then I realized something. The Devourers aren't generating this energy themselves. They're parasitically drawing it from existing sources." She activated a new display showing gravitational anomalies detected near attack sites. "They're feeding off black holes," Marcus breathed, understanding flooding through him. "More specifically, they're tapping into the exotic matter streams around rotating black holes. Kerr black holes generate enormous amounts of energy through frame-dragging effects. The Devourers have found a way to harvest that energy and channel it through their dimensional manipulation technology." Dr. Kim stared at the data, her scientific skepticism warring with growing excitement. "If that's true, then they're not invincible. Any parasitic system has vulnerabilities. Disrupt their connection to the energy source, and their weapons become useless," Lisa finished. "But there's more. I've been analyzing the progression patterns of their attacks. They're not just randomly hunting for resources. They're deliberately targeting systems with specific characteristics that enhance their energy harvesting capabilities." She brought up the galactic map, highlighting systems with particular quantum characteristics. "Look at the stellar compositions, the gravitational fields, the subspace resonance frequencies. They're creating a network of energy collection points, building toward something massive." Captain Vasquez frowned at the display. "Building toward what?" "I think they're preparing to harvest energy directly from the galactic core," Lisa said quietly. "The supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy contains more exotic matter than every other source combined. If they successfully tap into that, the implications hung in the air like a death sentence. The energy output of the galactic core black hole could power their dimensional manipulation technology on an unimaginable scale. They could consume entire sectors of the galaxy in days rather than decades. How long do we have? Marcus asked. Lisa's calculations appeared in the holographic display, complex mathematical models that painted a terrifying picture. Based on their current rate of network expansion, approximately 2 years before they reached the critical threshold for core tap initiation. Dr. Kim was already running calculations of her own. Could we disrupt their network? If we could eliminate key nodes in their energy collection system? Possibly, but it would require coordinated strikes across dozens of systems simultaneously. And we'd need weapons capable of neutralizing their dimensional manipulation technology. Lisa paused, her expression growing thoughtful. Unless, what is it? Marcus prompted, feeling her excitement through their bond. Lyrian cities used bioelectric resonance to shape matter at the molecular level. The same principles might work on their exotic matter constructs, but amplified through technological means rather than biological ones. She turned to Dr. Kim with obvious urgency. Do you have access to large-scale electromagnetic field generators? The planetary defense grid uses quantum-scale field manipulation for deflecting asteroids, Dr. Kim replied slowly. But you're talking about something completely different. The power requirements, the precision needed? What if we didn't try to overpower their technology directly? Marcus interrupted, a new idea forming. What if we use their own energy network against them? Both women turned to stare at him. Through their bond, Marcus felt Lisa's scientific mind engaging with his tactical thinking, the combination yielding insights neither could achieve alone. A resonance cascade, Lisa whispered. If we could introduce the right frequency disruption at key network nodes, the energy feedback would propagate throughout their entire system. Dr. Kim's eyes widened as she understood the implications. It would be like introducing a virus into a computer network. The disruption would spread automatically, using their own connections to carry the interference. But we'd need to get close enough to their key installations to plant the disruption devices, Captain Vasquez pointed out. And according to intelligence reports, those sites are heavily defended by devourer forces. Marcus felt a familiar weight settling over him. Once again, he was facing a situation where the right choice was also the most dangerous one. But this time he wasn't alone. Through his bond with Lisa, he felt her absolute determination to see this through, no matter the cost. Then we'll need to be creative about our approach, he said. The Confederation may not be willing to act, but there are other species out there. Other refugees, other survivors who have as much reason to hate the devourers as we do. Lisa's skin began glowing with sudden inspiration. Marcus, you're brilliant. We don't need the Confederation's official support. We need an alliance of the desperate. Every species that's been refused help. Every survivor who's been turned away. Every world that's been deemed unworthy of protection. A resistance movement, Captain Vasquez said, her military mind already working through the logistics. Small mobile forces capable of striking multiple targets simultaneously. It could work. Dr. Kim was already pulling up technical specifications. I'll need at least 3 months to develop the resonance disruptors, and we'll need detailed intelligence on devourer network nodes. I can provide the technical frameworks, Lisa said. And Marcus, your experience with interspecies diplomacy will be crucial for building the alliance we need. Marcus looked around the laboratory at the determined faces surrounding him. A human military captain, an elderly physicist, and an alien refugee who had lost everything. It wasn't much to pit against a galaxy-consuming enemy, but it was a start. Then we'd better get to work, he said. We have 2 years to save the galaxy, and the clock is already ticking. As if responding to his words, the ship's long-range sensors detected new signals from the galactic rim. More Devourer scouts were moving, their numbers increasing with each passing day. The final phase of their millennia-long harvest was beginning, and only a desperate alliance of outcasts and refugees stood in their way. But for the first time since Lisa had pleaded for his help in that diplomatic chamber, Marcus felt something that might have been hope. They had a plan. They had allies, and most importantly, they had each other. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humans decided to fight for something they believed in. 6 months later, the hidden asteroid base in the outer rim buzzed with activity that would have been impossible to imagine when Marcus first met. Lisa, Representatives from 17 different species worked side by side in the converted mining facility. Their combined efforts focused on a single goal: building the weapons needed to stop the Devourers. Marcus stood in the main command center, watching as human engineers collaborated with Kalari technicians to install the final components of the resonance disruptor array. The alliance they had built defied every diplomatic convention he had ever learned. Former enemies worked together, driven by shared desperation and the growing realization that traditional politics had become meaningless in the face of galactic extinction. "The quantum field generators are online," reported Zactel, a Pixori engineer whose world had been consumed 3 months ago. His normally cheerful species demeanor had been replaced by grim determination since he arrived at the base with only the clothes on his back and knowledge of advanced miniaturization technology. Lysa emerged from the technical labs, her bioluminescent skin flickering with exhaustion but also excitement. The past months had transformed her from a desperate refugee into the scientific leader of their resistance movement. Her unique understanding of both Devourer technology and interspecies cooperation had proven invaluable in coordinating their diverse alliance. "The prototype is ready for testing," she announced. "If our calculations are correct, this device should be able to initiate a cascade failure across an entire Devourer energy network." Captain Vasquez approached from the tactical planning station, her expression mixing hope with concern. "Our scout ships have identified 12 critical network nodes within striking distance, but intelligence reports suggest the Devourers are accelerating their timeline. We may have weeks rather than months before they attempt the galactic core tap." Marcus felt the familiar weight of command settling over him. Over the past months, he had somehow become the de facto leader of their resistance alliance, a role he had never sought but couldn't abandon. Through his bond with Lisa, he could feel her confidence in him, her absolute trust that he would find a way to succeed when failure meant the extinction of all their peoples. "What about Confederation response?" asked Ambassador Torvan, who had quietly joined their alliance after witnessing the Devourers consume a Thek colony world. "Have they shown any willingness to acknowledge the threat?" Marcus's expression darkened. "According to our contacts on Station Kepler, the Confederation Council is still debating whether to form a committee to study the feasibility of investigating potential response options. They'll be discussing bureaucratic procedures while the galaxy burns. Then we proceed without them," declared Vera Kolsink, a Vraxian military commander whose crystalline form had been scarred in the defense of her homeworld. "My remaining fleet units are ready to coordinate with the strike teams." The diverse group around the command table represented the remnants of dozens of worlds, species that had been deemed unworthy of Confederation protection until it was too late. But their shared trauma had forged them into something unprecedented, a truly unified galactic force focused on a single purpose. Lysa activated the main tactical display, showing the network of Devourer installations across 3 sectors of space. The resonance cascade requires precise timing. All 12 nodes must be disrupted within a 30-minute window, or the energy feedback will be insufficient to propagate through their entire network. "Simultaneous strikes across that much space," Captain Vasquez mused. "It's ambitious but doable with the right coordination." Marcus studied the display, his mind working through the tactical challenges. Each strike team would be composed of volunteers from different species, their ships modified with the new resonance disruptors. It was a desperate plan with minimal chance of success, but it was the only option they had. "There's something else," Lysa said quietly.
"I've been analyzing the energy patterns around the galactic core."
"The Devourers aren't just preparing to tap into the central black hole. They're building something around it. A structure of enormous scale." The display shifted to show long-range sensor data from the galactic center. Massive constructs were taking shape in the space around the supermassive black hole, their purpose unclear but obviously significant. "What kind of structure?" Marcus asked. "I think it's a dimensional anchor," Lysa replied, her scientific excitement warring with obvious terror. "If they can establish a permanent connection between our dimension and their energy realm, they won't need to consume worlds one at a time. They could drain the entire galaxy's energy directly. The implications hit the assembled commanders like a physical blow, not just extinction but complete erasure from existence itself." "How long before it's operational?" asked Commander Kolsink. "Based on construction rates, perhaps 6 weeks. But Marcus, there's something more." The dimensional anchor is protected by the largest concentration of devourer forces anyone has ever detected. Thousands of their ships, energy barriers that extend for light years around the construction site. Marcus felt Lisa's fear through their bond, but also her unwavering determination. She had lost everything to these creatures, but she refused to let that loss be meaningless. Then we'll have to hit them before it's complete, he said simply. The network disruption will be our opening move. If we can cripple their energy collection system, their defenses around the galactic core will be vulnerable. You're talking about a direct assault on the galactic center, Captain Vasquez said incredulously. Even with their network disrupted, the firepower required. Every ship we have, Marcus confirmed. Every species, every refugee, every survivor who's willing to fight. We throw everything at them in one massive coordinated strike. Ambassador Torvan's tentacles writhed with agitation. It would be suicide. Even if we succeed in stopping the dimensional anchor, most of our forces would be lost in the attempt. And if we don't try, everyone dies anyway, Marcus replied. At least this way we go down fighting. Through his bond with Lisa, Marcus felt her sharing his determination. They had come so far from that desperate plea in the diplomatic chamber. What had begun as an act of compassion had evolved into the galaxy's last hope for survival. I want volunteers only, Marcus continued. No one will be ordered into this mission. Anyone who wants to find a safe place to wait it out has that right. One by one, the assembled commanders voiced their commitment. Species that had been enemies for centuries were volunteering to die together, in defense of a galaxy that had largely ignored their suffering. It was perhaps the most human moment Marcus had ever witnessed, performed by beings who weren't human at all. Then we have our plan, he said finally. Network disruption in 2 weeks, followed immediately by the assault on the galactic core. Commander Kolsink, I want our best pilots assigned to the strike teams. Captain Vasquez, coordinate with our supply ships to ensure every vessel is armed with resonance disruptors. Ambassador Torvan, use your diplomatic contacts to spread word to any remaining free systems. If anyone wants to join us, they're welcome. As the meeting dispersed, Lisa remained behind with Marcus, her hand finding his as they stood before the tactical display. Are you afraid? She asked quietly. Marcus considered the question, feeling the complex mixture of emotions flowing through their bond. Fear, yes, but also purpose, determination, and something that might have been peace. I'm terrified, he admitted. But I'm also grateful. 6 months ago, I was a failed diplomat watching the galaxy slide toward destruction, while politicians argued about procedure. Now I'm part of something that matters. Whatever happens, we're not going down quietly. Lisa's skin glowed softly in response to his emotions, their bond carrying his courage back to her, amplified by her scientific certainty that they were fighting the right battle. Together? She asked. Together, Marcus confirmed. In 2 weeks, they would either save the galaxy or die in the attempt. Given the alternative, it seemed like a fair trade. The final battle began in the depths of space between galaxies, where the Devourer network nodes hung like malevolent stars against the cosmic void. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Resistance flagship Redemption, watching as 12 strike teams positioned themselves for simultaneous attacks across 3 sectors of space. Beside him, Lisa monitored the resonance disruptor arrays, her bioluminescent skin pulsing in rhythm with the quantum field generators. All teams report ready, Captain Vasquez announced from the tactical station. Disruptor charges are armed and synchronized. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the enemy installation they had been assigned to destroy. The Devourer node resembled a massive crystalline structure, its surface crackling with exotic energy that bent space around it in impossible ways. Sensor readings showed dozens of enemy ships patrolling the perimeter, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light itself. Remember? Lisa called out to the bridge crew. We only get one shot at this. If the resonance cascade fails to propagate, the Devourers will adapt their defenses, and will never get another chance. Marcus activated the fleet-wide communication channel, his voice carrying to the 17 different species preparing to risk everything for a galaxy that had largely ignored their suffering. Today we fight not as separate peoples, but as one united force, he began. The bureaucrats and politicians said we were too weak, too divided, too insignificant to matter. Today we prove them wrong. Today we show the galaxy what happens when ordinary beings refuse to accept extinction. On his tactical display, Marcus could see the other strike teams positioning themselves around their assigned targets. Commander Kolsink's Vraxian survivors, preparing to assault the heavily defended node near the outer rim. Zactel leading a mixed squadron of Pixori and human fighters against the installation protecting the energy relay station. Ambassador Torvan commanding a desperate alliance of refugee ships from a dozen different worlds. 30 seconds to simultaneous strike, Vasquez reported. Lysa reached out and took Marcus's hand, their empathic bond allowing them to share strength in the final moments before the attack. Through their connection, he felt her scientific certainty that their plan would work, mixed with her absolute trust in his leadership. It was the most human gesture imaginable, performed by an alien who had lost everything but still chose to fight for others. 10 seconds, Vasquez called out. 5, 4, 3, 2, mark. The Redemption's weapons systems fired in perfect synchronization with 11 other strike teams across the galaxy. Resonance disruptors lanced out toward their targets. Exotic energy beams designed to exploit the fundamental weaknesses in Devourer technology that Lysa had identified months ago. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The enemy installation absorbed the disruptor beam without visible effect, its crystalline surface continuing to pulse with malevolent energy. Marcus felt his heart sink as he wondered if their calculations had been wrong. Then the cascade began. The Devourer node suddenly flickered, its stable energy patterns becoming chaotic. Cracks of brilliant light spread across its surface as the resonance disruption propagated through the exotic matter matrix. Within seconds, the cascade effect reached the node's connection to the greater network, and feedback energy began racing along the quantum links between installations. "It's working," Lysa shouted, her instruments showing the disruption spreading through the Devourer network like wildfire. The cascade is propagating across all primary nodes. Their energy collection system is collapsing. On Marcus's tactical display, reports flooded in from the other strike teams. Commander Kolsink confirmed successful disruption of her target. Zactel reported that the energy relay station was experiencing catastrophic failure. One by one, the network nodes that had fed the Devourer's power went dark. But their victory celebration was cut short as space around them filled with enemy reinforcements. Devourer ships emerged from dimensional rifts, their numbers far exceeding intelligence estimates. The creatures had prepared for the possibility of network failure, concentrating their remaining forces to protect their most critical asset. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," Marcus broadcast to the assembled resistance fleet. The promotion had been unofficial, granted by desperate commanders who needed someone to follow into the impossible. "Phase 1 is complete. The network is down. Now we finish this." The journey to the galactic core took 18 hours at maximum hyperdrive speed, with Devourer forces harassing them every step of the way. By the time they reached the massive construct surrounding the central black hole, the Resistance fleet had been reduced to fewer than half its original numbers. But those who remained were the most determined survivors of dozens of worlds, united by shared purpose and unbreakable resolve. The dimensional anchor was even more massive than long-range sensors had suggested. Exotic matter structures thousands of kilometers long twisted around the supermassive black hole, their purpose obviously nearing completion. Energy readings showed that the anchor was already beginning to establish connections between dimensions, tearing holes in reality itself. "Devourer forces are moving to intercept," reported Commander Kolsink from her battle-scarred cruiser. Preliminary count shows over 3,000 enemy vessels. Marcus studied the tactical situation, his mind working through possibilities that all seemed to lead to the same conclusion. The Resistance fleet was outnumbered 10 to 1, facing an enemy that had been preparing for this confrontation for decades. "All ships, concentrate fire on the dimensional anchor's primary support structures," he ordered. "We don't need to destroy the entire construct. If we can collapse the dimensional framework, the feedback will tear the rest apart." What followed was the most desperate battle in galactic history. Refugee ships from dozens of worlds threw themselves against the Devourer forces with suicidal courage, their weapons blazing as they carved through enemy formations toward the dimensional anchor. Species that had been enemies for millennia died side by side, their sacrifice creating openings for others to press the attack. The Redemption led the final assault, its hull scarred by exotic energy weapons but its crew unbroken. Marcus watched as Lysa worked frantically at her instruments, trying to identify the exact resonance frequency needed to collapse the dimensional anchor's framework. "There," she called out, triumph mixing with exhaustion in her voice. "The primary support matrix has a harmonic vulnerability at 2.4 terahertz. If we can hit it with concentrated disruptor fire. All remaining ships, focus your disruptors on the coordinates Lysa is transmitting," Marcus ordered. "This is our last chance." The surviving vessels of the Resistance fleet converged on the dimensional anchor's weak point, their exotic weapons combining into a focused beam of resonance energy. For a terrifying moment it seemed like their attack was having no effect. Then reality itself began to unravel around the construct. The dimensional anchor's framework collapsed in a cascade of impossible physics, tearing holes between dimensions that the Devourers could no longer control. Their carefully constructed bridge between realities became a catastrophic implosion, consuming their ships and installations in dimensional chaos. As the exotic matter construct collapsed into the black hole, dragging the remaining Devourer forces with it, Marcus felt a moment of perfect clarity. They had done it. Against impossible odds, a ragtag alliance of refugees and outcasts had saved the galaxy from complete annihilation. "Marcus," Lysa said softly, her hand finding his as they watched the last of the Devourer fleet disappear into dimensional chaos. "It's over. They're gone." The surviving ships of the Resistance fleet hung motionless in space around the galactic core, their crews too exhausted and overwhelmed to fully process what they had accomplished. Then slowly the communication channels began filling with voices from across the galaxy. The Confederation, finally acknowledging the scope of the threat they had faced, was sending messages of gratitude and offers of alliance. "Admiral Chen," came a transmission from Station Kepler, where the same diplomatic chamber that had witnessed Lysa's desperate plea now hosted emergency sessions on galactic reconstruction. "The Confederation Council formally requests your presence to discuss Earth's full membership and your leadership role in establishing new protocols for mutual defense." Marcus looked at Lysa, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her violet eyes. They had started this journey as desperate outcasts, but they were ending it as the architects of a new galactic order built on cooperation rather than bureaucratic exclusion. "Tell them we'll be there," Marcus replied. "But this time we're not coming as supplicants. We're coming as equals." As the Redemption turned toward home, Marcus reflected on how far they had traveled from that moment when a desperate alien woman had pleaded with a human to marry her. What had begun as an act of compassion had evolved into something far greater. Proof that when beings chose to stand together against the darkness, even the impossible could be overcome.